Welcome back to another edition of the Gridiron Review. Pete Medhurst this week joined by, of course, Bill's colleague over the Capitol, Bob Hoke. Good to have you with us. And obviously, we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, youth football playoffs with one less regular season game. And I think that has seemed very odd to fans still, only 9 games. I know people will want to tarnish South River's 9-0 undefeated season, saying they didn't go 10-0 or anything like that, but fool on you. Coming into the season, you and I were just talking off mic, coming into the season, I think we had an inkling that South River would be good. We thought they would be maybe one of the top 2 or 3 clubs. But did we have the inclination that they would be this good and obviously run the table here in the county?
Well, I think they got a lot of people's attention last year. Actually, it started really a couple years ago. I mean, this was a 1-9 football team 3 years ago. The next year, they were struggling middle of the season, won their last 3 games, finished 6-4, didn't make the playoffs, but finished strong. And then last year really put it all together. They won their last 3 or 4 regular season games, qualified for the playoffs, but hey, congratulations, you get to play Broadneck. Well, all they did was go to Broadneck, an undefeated team, and knock them off in the playoffs. And that's when I think we started saying, okay, maybe this team isn't too bad. And they had a ton of juniors last year who, of course, are now seniors, and they just really put it together this year. Yeah, like you said, I don't know that we saw 9-0 coming. We weren't too sure what Broadneck had. Of course, Old Mill, Meade. But they really have just they run the table. I mean, I don't want to say easily, but they're scoring a ton of points. They haven't had too many close games, and it just seems like it's the right time. I mean, obviously this is the year. Such a senior-laden team, this is the year if they're going to get it done.
I was going to say, too, in public schools, this is the kind of team that you dream of, to be senior-laden, especially at the skill positions. Right. I mean, they are loaded. Faust, Johnson, the running back. They've got receivers who can all catch the ball. It's ironic. I was watching one of the youth football games this week. SRYA's 11U national teams, number 1 seed, going to be in the championship game this weekend. They'll play Sunday at Severn Park in the 4:30 title game. They're running the exact same offense as the high school, and I think that kind of tells us something, that Coach Dolch has guys on his staff that are part of the SRYA staff. So we're seeing those building blocks being put in place at the youth league level, and I don't think you can place a value on those kids getting that experience.
Yeah, and by the time they get to high school, I mean, like you said, I know Chuck Markowitz used to do it all the time with Gork. They're running the same offense. By the time you get to the high school level, you've already have some experience running that offense. So it is good to see him out there in the community, because you need to get out there to those youth leagues, as you've seen, and start to figure out what you have. So of course, they're going to lose a lot, this year, but it sounds like the replacements are well on their way to coming to South River and kind of continuing this tradition.
I think one of the good stories this year was Mike Francis at Meade, and I talk on this show often. I talk not about what they're doing on the field. I talk about what Mike is doing off the field, and so he's keeping the kids engaged, not only on the field, but also keeping them engaged off the field. A lot of activities for the team in the community. We know how much of a factor that can be in taking up that time where kids can go adrift at the high school level, and now they're seeing the results of that. I think they've created a really good culture where those kids now really want to play football at Meade. He's had a great staff. I think their 6-2 record is one of the better stories of the season as well.
Yeah, keep an eye on them in the playoffs. They started off 1-2. And had a game at Broadneck coming up. I think we were thinking, oh gosh, here we go. They're going to be 1-3. Hopefully, Mike Francis can keep this team together. They knocked off Broadneck in week 3, and they haven't lost since. So they entered the playoffs actually 7-2 and on a 6-game winning streak. And who knows, maybe South River and Old Mill got them early before they kind of hit their stride. So they can be a very dangerous team in the playoffs. They better be careful with North County in that first round. But I know some other teams are keeping an eye on Meade. And like you said about what Mike is doing in the community, I mean, one of the bigger stories was there was a fire in the community, and he quickly, this happened on a Saturday night into Sunday morning, or maybe a Sunday night into Monday morning, and by Monday afternoon he was organizing efforts to get whatever the family needed, whether it was clothing, food, a bunch of gift cards, got a lot of the players involved. They're out there accepting these donations, taking them to the school. They had a central person that would take the stuff to the families. And they didn't just stop right there. They followed up. I think there might have been another fire in the community that they reached out. I know he organizes a lot of things with the team, whether it's a bowling night or something like that. They have a nice big team meal, which I'm sure a lot of schools do, but before every game. But yeah, you're right. He is keeping them engaged. And Meade gets a bad rap every once in a while with some other things that is perceived to go on at the school. But I think one thing he did was he organized. I think you and Pete, or you and Bill have talked about before, a staff that has some name recognition. Tenaro Sharps, Lonnie Pierce, But they're getting it done on the field, and it's good to see that they're getting it done on the field. And he's also, like you mentioned, keeping them engaged in the community.
Ironically, in week 1, when Old Mill went to Croom and played Douglas and got beat 30-0, there was some angst in social media, and everybody was like, a little irritated. We're not used to seeing that from Old Mill. But all they've done since then is only the loss to South River since then. But, I think when you play at a place like Old Mill that has expectations, the expectations are state championship or bust every year. They took that initial shot, but I think it said a lot about the team, about the way they came back from that, and obviously now have a legitimate chance here going into the postseason.
Yeah, and as you mentioned with the 9-game schedule, one loss really could put you in a bad situation. But it was a loss to a Douglas team who's a perennial power, and all they have done since then is lost just 1 game in the county, and that was to South River. So even if we had the old playoff format, they would have qualified. So there's no asterisk beside their playoff appearance. But it has been a few years. Old Mill, we were used to seeing in the playoffs every single year. So for them not to make it 2 years in a row was a big deal. And so this year, they're beating the teams they're supposed to beat. They're not killing teams. They've had a couple close calls, but they've done what they always done. They can run the ball. They're getting good quarterback play, good defense. I had them a few weeks ago against South River, and they basically marched down the field on their initial drive, 12, 13 plays, had to settle for a field goal, so they went up 3-0. South River, I think, went 3 and out right after that, and you're thinking, okay, this is going to be a game, but then, a 28-point second quarter by South River took care of that. But, I think it's, them, and they're also going to be a dangerous team. So, and it's weird because you're not going to have that region final, so you're going to have the first 2 rounds, and then the state will reseed. So who knows the type of a matchup you get in that state quarterfinal round. But the thing about South River is, if you look at the point system, they're number 1 in 4A. So if they keep taking care of business, they'll just keep playing a bunch of games in Edgewater, and then next thing you know, they'll be at Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium, obviously, if they keep winning.
Look, for Broadneck, it's almost as if they've kind of flown under the radar this year. You lose a great playmaker like Ethan Williams. You lose a veteran offensive line. And I think that's the thing that we don't necessarily make too much light of. But when a lot of these schools who have good skill people trend a little bit downward than what we've seen, usually it's because they've lost great players up front. There's no doubt Broadneck's offensive line last year was one of the best in the county, if not the best.
And obviously, wouldn't it be ironic, Broadneck has these great seasons where they go undefeated and get knocked off in the playoffs by somebody, whether it's a South River. A couple years ago was North Point. Hard to call that an upset, but Broadneck was the top seed, and now here they are 4-5, and they're going on the road in the first round. Watch them, kind of go through the region as a 4-5 team, as opposed to the last couple of years when they were 10-0. So yes, they're. I don't know if it's just a different dynamic when you enter the playoffs as the top dog. Everybody's coming after you. Now they can just kind of ease their way in. They do have a tough game with Arundel on Friday. But if you looked at the last couple of years, when you just look at whether it's our all-county team, whether you go to Broadneck for a signing day ceremony, a lot of their players that were moving on were offensive and defensive linemen. So of course it's going to be tough to replace those guys. Incidentally, I did see over the weekend where Ethan Williams had his first collegiate reception for Boston College over the weekend. Yeah,
no doubt about that. I know my boy Will Maynard, his cousin, was trekking up there early in the season. They're all trying to wait to see if they could see number 82 Hall 1 in. That's going to be a great matchup of quarterbacks, too, between Josh Ehrlich and Austin Sly. Austin's really come back this year and played extremely well. Plus, Arundel, when they've been really good this year, it's been because they've also been able to run the ball as well. Yeah,
so Sly came back from that injury. I think he came back in the South River game. It took him about a quarter or so to get going, but he put up some numbers in that game. South River did eventually win. And then you have Jordan Andrews running the ball with Sly, and Sly's putting up numbers every week. If you look at the numbers he's putting up, in fact, just last week, this is interesting because they just played Broadneck last week, and here they are. They're going to play again. So keep an eye on Arundel. They'll have the home field on Friday for this one.
Bill and I made light of this earlier this year, and it's kind of disturbing that we see this kind of thing in youth sports culture where Kayla Alexander, her travel team in soccer made her sign a contract that she wouldn't be able to play soccer at her high school. Now, she's a goalie, and it just defies logic to me, and always will. But what a positive she made out of it by going to kick for the Northeast football team, which, oh, by the way, Anne Arundel County thought they were getting rid of North Point, except Northeast is going to North Point coming up in the playoffs. But what a positive that turned into for Coach Baublitz and company at Northeast, where, again, new stadium there and everything. And over the last couple of years, I think Brian's done a really good job of making football an in thing at Northeast again as well.
It's funny because when she when she was named to the team, this wasn't a public relations ploy, anything like
she
that.
Kicked the ball.
She had to make the team.
Yeah.
And I those first couple games, she was good on her extra points. She had a 42-yard field goal against Glen Burnie. I don't know if you saw Adam Vinatieri on Sunday, because I did.
Yeah,
and he missed a 43-yard field goal that wasn't even close. So.
And as a Steeler fan, Bob's going,
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then she just hit, I know there were still about 6 minutes or so left to go in the game, but it was a low-scoring game, so who knows if there was going to be more points scored, and all she does is hit a 26-yard field goal. And if you saw the video of that field goal, it wasn't like it just barely snuck in. I mean, she really has good form. I was very surprised, and I went out to do the story on her before the season, and I was talking to her, and I said, so what position do you play in soccer? I assumed that, I was trying to get her to kind of give me an idea about the kicking motion with kicking a soccer ball, kicking a football, and then she throws, oh, by the way, I'm the goalie. And I said, oh, well, okay, but she does have experience playing in the field in the past. So obviously her soccer skills, do kind of come through with the way she kicks the ball. But yeah, just probably one of the better stories, in
she's
the
a Dino Bowl legend.
Exactly, now. Yeah. But she doesn't do anything else. She can say she kicked, the go-ahead field goal in the Dino Bowl. And I did see something over the weekend. I think it might have been one of the private schools in the area. Their soccer coach, their club soccer coach, actually asked them to not play soccer for their high schools, not let alone a different sport.
Yeah.
They didn't want them playing the sport that they are.
It's just really disturbing to me that we're in a culture that promotes that kind of activity. And I'm sure she's a great goalie. She could play travel soccer for anybody, but to ask someone not to participate with their classmates and the people in the community was really disturbing to me. Chesapeake has to rebound from that loss. They've got to go to Oxon Hill to play in the first round of the playoffs. But isn't it ironic, as we've been doing these shows through the year, we always bring you around playoff time, the fact that we're consistently talking about Chesapeake as a playoff type team, because those of us who've been around the county, we know for a long time that word was never uttered when it was referred to with Chesapeake. And obviously, Rob has done a terrific job there year in and year out, like Brian at Northeast, making football cool there again, so maybe kids don't drift out to the public schools, stay within the community and play there.
Yeah, and this is, I think, 3 of the last 4 years for Chesapeake getting in. Of course, they're in this year because of the new format, but hey, they're in under the new format. They're, last year I think they lost the Dina Bowl to Northeast. A week later, had to come back and play that same Northeast team and knocked them off. Then ended up going on the road down to Salisbury to J.M. Bennett and won the region. Of course, they had a tough state semifinal matchup with Linganore. But to talk about Chesapeake and Northeast, 10 years ago the Dina Bowl was one of those. It's a cute game. It's a neat game. Might have been one of the only times we would cover those teams throughout the year, kind of throw them a little bit of a bone. But they've both obviously playing much better, competing in the county. Sure, they stub their toes every once in a while against the likes of Broadneck and Old Mill, but they're kind of holding their own. And it's not like they just had one real impressive class come through. They've graduated some players, brought in some other players. I think they're seeing. I think they're probably 2 of the teams that have, and maybe you could speak more of this, the youth programs. And in Pasadena, I think they kind of. I don't know if they kind of compete for some of the same, maybe some to play for the Bucs.
Question. Everybody in youth football right now competes for a lot of the same kids. You got, Panthers and Bucs obviously are the 2 main ones there. Rob Elliott, of course, for years involved with the Panthers program. Kenny Browning, all those guys that are doing a great job there. And again, just like we talked about, SRYA does a great job feeding in to the South River program. Panthers do the same thing in the Chesapeake, Bucs in the Northeast. And I think that holds a lot of weight, especially when a coach pays attention in the community. He makes that connection, so when that kid then goes to school in 9th grade, he sees that guy, oh, that's the coach, I'm going to go play for him. I think that's an important part of that relationship. Oh, and look, even my Southern Bulldogs ended a 31-game losing streak this year, not winning just once, but twice.
And if you looked at the standings, they were tied with the final team that got in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I think it came down to wins. I think Southern had 2 wins, and whoever got in, I want to say Crossland maybe had 3 wins. So they were that close. So, I don't know if they felt like they were going to win the region, but to just play that extra game and whatever you got to do.
I always say, the great thing about these playoffs, you get your extra practices, and until somebody beats you, you got a chance.
I mean, everyone's going in right now undefeated. They're 0-0, so whatever happened in the regular season, now you have a chance to kind of right any wrongs you may have had and just win a couple games, and who knows what can happen.
And years ago, obviously, when they weighed on all the other sports, we have an open playoff system. At first, I wasn't necessarily really enthused by that, but you know what? why not give
Sure.
high school kids extra games?
Yeah.
I mean, what's there to bother from it? Yeah, extra practices, especially for the guys that are coming back next
Right.
year. It's great for those guys, and it's a great experience. You actually get to feel what it's like to be in a playoff game. So, later on in your career, you might be a part of that. Let's talk about fall sports real quick in the county. Another great story. Bill and I mentioned it a little bit last week, but Sarah Heary took over at St. Mary's. She's the wife of my color man at Navy, Mike Heary. Took over the volleyball program. Her daughter plays on the team, and they win for the very first time a championship. They'd been knocking on the door with that program, but they finally get to bang the door down and win a championship there at St. Mary's. And I'll say this, under Allison Fondale, she's done a really good job here
very
of kind of organizing the ship a little bit there, and I think it needed some organizing at one point. And I think there are a lot of great things now happening within that St. Mary's athletic program.
Talk about the volleyball team. The team they beat, St. John's Catholic Prep, they just played them maybe 2 weeks ago at home. I actually covered the game, and they lost in 5 sets. And I said to the coach, I said, is this maybe a good thing? You guys are undefeated in the conference, and maybe you just needed to kind of, almost humble yourself a little bit. And, of course, we don't want to say it was a guarantee, but I said there's a pretty good chance you're going to see this team in a couple weeks. And sure enough, they bounced back a couple weeks later and beat that same team, that knocked them off. To get back to what you were saying about Allison Fondale, I mean, look at some of the coaches they have in place. I know for a while there wasn't a whole lot of stability with the football program. They'd gone through some coaches, but now with Jason Boudroni, a former University of Miami lineman, and they've won 2 straight B conference titles. They're very much in the mix this year. A lot of other the wrestling team has won a couple B conference championships. She's got Chuck Miller coaching the girls basketball team. But yeah, real nice to see the volleyball team after coming so close the last I think the last 2 or 3 years that they were in the final. So they were that close. They had that taste of defeat, and I think this year they may have fallen behind 2 sets to 1 and had to win those last 2. So maybe that big game experience those last couple of years, really helped them.
It's going to be interesting to see when the new Crofton High School comes on, what happens to the school population in places like Arundel and South River as a result of it. But man, through the last couple of years, in so many sports, especially in the Olympic sports, quote like we like to call them, the ones outside of football and basketball, South River and Severn apart, especially within the female sports. They have really given us some terrific theater over the last couple of years in sports like field hockey and soccer along the way.
Not to mention lacrosse, of course. Volleyball, South River has been a perennial power the last couple of years. Severn Park was really good for a while. They had a couple, by their standards, down years. Here they are. They're in a region final this week. So, yeah, it is going to be interesting to see just what it does, who it pulls from. And, I don't know if it's going to be a situation where it's going to knock schools down in classifications. They're going to lose that many students to where maybe they could drop to a 3A. I don't know if I see that happening. And then I guess also interesting to see, are they going to be creating almost like an all-star team, at Crofton? Of course, give them a couple years once they get the athletic department up and running and start to get those those kids feeding in. But it just adds to it. I mean, when South River and Arundel play, South River, Severn Park, they're nice rivalries. Then you throw in this Crofton High School right in the middle, and it should be very interesting.
Interestingly, too, we're only let's see, it's November 5th. We're only 10 days from winter sports getting underway.
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, speaking of Chuck Miller, ran into him last week at the Severn St. Mary's football game, and they actually started this Monday. So the private schools have started, the public schools started in a few weeks. I'm already hearing rumblings of certain teams that have certain players. I hear Southern has a very good girls basketball player that kind of came on last year. And in fact, I joked with Chuck Miller the other day. I said, how did you not go down there and kind of pull her away? And he said, I think he kind of said he kind of tried. We also had one of the better players in the county last year. From Broadneck, Nicole Hagopian, if I'm saying her last name right. Just heard the other day her family moved to Virginia, so she's playing somewhere down in Fairfax, Virginia. So she's not going to be on the Broadneck team. But I'd say for us, let us get through the fall first. We have a lot of work to do here the next couple of weeks. With the playoffs, and then I guess we'll worry about the winter at that point.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm sure I'll see you along the trail. Obviously I umpire high school softball in the county, but my officiating board in basketball got the Anne Arundel County girls contract, so I will probably see some of you all along the way officiating some girls basketball in the county coming up here. But as you said, we've got till I think the first week in December until the public school games begin.
Yeah.
That gives you a couple, maybe what? Well, if anybody goes to the football state championship,
Yeah,
that runs
yeah,
right into it.
Yeah, it's funny. It used to be, I could have sworn we used to have maybe about a week in between where we can just kind of shut it down, take it easy. But by the time the fall season's winding down, next thing you know, we're starting to get all county information going, players of the year, and then we start working on the preview. So there really is no kind of downtime. It just seemed to me like 10 years ago, I thought there was always just that 1 week where we just say, look, go your separate ways for a week and come back, recharge a week later. But now it's pretty much August 15th to Memorial Day, I guess.
No doubt. It's like I tell people September to May, probably not a good idea to ask me to do much of anything outside of being related to sports. And those stars of tomorrow is obviously the ones we'll be talking about in the future in high school sports. On display this weekend, go to aacounty.org, hit the team schedules page, and pull up the playoff brackets. And you can see Friday, Saturday, and Sunday's action all weekend long. Of course, the American Division all one day on Saturday. Those games will be at Severn Park High School, as will some Sunday action as well. Go to those team schedules. I'm telling you right now, there's a 12 o'clock game on Sunday at Severn Park. It is at Glen Burnie. It is the 7U Central Championship game. There's only one division in 7U. I'm telling you right now, that game between Brooklyn Park and Severn is going to be worth the price because you get in absolutely free. But I'm telling you, you're going to want to go watch that game. It's part of a great weekend of activity as we celebrate football here in Anne Arundel County. Bob, as always, appreciate the visit.
Oh, I'll always enjoy it. Thank you. All
right, Bob Hoke and his staff will be bringing you all the action of the playoffs coming up this week in the Capital Gazette newspapers. Come back, talk colleges and pros when we return on the Gridiron Review. Welcome back. Bill and I, of course, this past week we're in Hartford, Connecticut. Boy, it was a scenic backdrop with about 10 of our close personal friends as Navy beat UConn 56-10. Malcolm Perry running for over 100 yards in that game for the midshipmen. And defensively, another stifling performance from Brian Newberry and Brian Norwood's defense. Jackson Perkins with a huge play on the defensive side. It's a week off now for the Mids. November the 16th, it is the big one. As long as Notre Dame beats Duke this week, it should present a matchup of ranked teams between Navy and Notre Dame for the first time since 1978, the last time that these two teams will have met as ranked foes. It's going to be a good one. Mids are at 7-1. Notre Dame, of course, trying to keep their faint playoff hopes afloat with 2 losses now on the campaign. Great escape this week against the Virginia Tech Hokies as they won by a score of 21-20 in their contest. Meanwhile, tough times for Maryland continue. When the quarterback doesn't play well, you're not going to generate much offense. Tyrell Pegram, not healthy, got hurt. Josh Jackson came in. He's really not healthy. And Maryland got beat around by Michigan. And now you look up, Minnesota rather. And who is it next? Who? Ohio State. So now you're talking about having faced Michigan, an undefeated Minnesota, and now maybe the best team in the country in successive weeks. Not exactly appetizing for the Terrapins, but if you go look at the recruits that Mike Loxley has coming in, don't worry, help is on the way. Meanwhile, in the pros, the Redskins lose to the Bills. What else is new? 24-9. 3 really good drives in the game, but when you only kick field goals against a good defense like Buffalo, you're not going to get many more opportunities than that. Buffalo and Josh Allen played very well. How about this? 3 quarterbacks in the NFL this week all named Allen, and they all won. Brandon Allen for Denver, Kyle Allen for the Carolina Panthers, and Josh Allen for the Buffalo Bills. Kind of an interesting statistical quirk there. Meanwhile, the Ravens, what more can you say about what John Harbaugh and Greg Roman have done committing to the type of offense that they have to best suit Lamar Jackson's skills? A lot of times we'll see teams take the player, try to jam him into a system that doesn't fit him. Greg Roman and John Harbaugh, they have done the opposite. They've said, okay, Lamar, we know what you can do. We're going to ask you to do what you can do. And when you do what they did early to the Patriots in that game, that's tough to do against a New England defense that have been playing extremely well this year. How many times have we seen it too? Cyrus Jones fumbles a punt. That let New England back in the game, But later on, it would be a New England turnover on the interception by Earl Thomas, a fumble recovery by Marlon Humphrey. That guy is all over the ball. He and his former college teammate Minka Fitzpatrick of Alabama both had defensive touchdowns this week. Second of the year for Humphrey, and the Ravens got by the New England Patriots by a score of 37-20. And if you didn't believe in Baltimore before this past week, you certainly have to believe in Baltimore now. A reminder, Youth Football Championship Day, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We've got games all throughout the weekend. Go to aacounty.org, hit up the team schedules, check the playoff brackets to see where your favorites are playing. Maybe it's a friend in your community, your cousin, whoever. Get on out and give them support. It's free admission. Most of the schools will have concession stands open for you as well. The American stuff is Saturday morning. Bill and I will be there in the morning portion of it, so we'll look for you out there at Severn Park High School. Come up and say hi to us. We'd love to make a connection with you on Saturday morning as we have the youth football playoffs coming up this weekend. For Marky Mark behind the scenes, for Bob Hoke, I'm Pete Medhurst. Thanks for joining us this week on the Gridiron Review.